In 2019, there was an altercation at a football game between two rival Italian teams, Juventus and AC Milan. During the match, a member of the Italian parliament, who was also a Juventus fan, had a run-in with some AC Milan fans. He ended up getting into a massive brawl with them. But he wasn't alone. Soon enough, all the Juventus fans got involved. They beat up the Milan supporters until the police showed up to break it up. When the police finally did step in, they found that things were bad enough to end the game early. The fight between these two groups shows that even modern fans can get into epic feuds that go beyond sports. But this is nothing compared to medieval feuds that went on for years and sometimes even centuries. Feuds were so common back then that the lives of common folk were often dictated by whether or not their family was at war with another family. Sometimes the violence would be so intense that entire communities would have to take sides in these fights. And when you chose a side, you couldn't back down, or you would lose face. This led to some very bloody battles, but it could also lead to people being locked in conflicts that lasted for generations. Here are some of the bloodiest feuds from medieval Europe. The first feud we have to look at is the Hatfields and the McCoys. Okay, you might be thinking that this feud is fake and actually comes from the famous American feud that happened in the 1800s. But surprisingly, this feud actually has its roots in medieval England. One legend claims that the conflict started when William Hatfield killed the McCoy family's boar, leading to a conflict that lasted for generations. This version of the story starts in the 14th century and goes through several murders before it jumps over to America, where the feud continues. There's no evidence for this claim, though, so it's likely just a myth someone made up to make the conflict seem more interesting. What is true is that the first recorded Hatfield-McCoy conflict happened in 1570. This conflict ended in bloodshed. But at this point it was because of land disputes rather than pigs. This conflict eventually led to both families having to swear oaths to stay peaceful, but unfortunately they didn't keep their word and violence broke out once again. In the following decades, members of each family were accused of a series of crimes against one another. These included murder, manslaughter, assault, arson, and even rape. It would seem that neither family was innocent, and both were guilty of many of these charges. Things really ramped up in 1627 when a Hatfield man named Edmund Custis killed the McCoy family's son. This led to his cousin coming back for revenge and killing one of Edmund's brothers. This meant that the cycle of violence continued. There was an attempted murder in 1629, and then a double murder in 1633. Things only stopped in 1635. When a local lord decided to intervene. He forced the families to meet and reconcile, even though they made peace. The feud would last for another 350 years until two boys accidentally killed each other while hunting.
Oh.
This wouldn't be the last time that young people were caught up in the hatred of their parents, and it won't be the last time that children will suffer because of their family's feud. Now let's travel over to Italy to look at one of the most famous feuds in history, the Moncada and the Chiaramonte. This feud started in 1282 after a group of German traders who were staying at an inn owned by the Moncada family were attacked by robbers. Some of the men were killed, and others survived by hiding in the home of a local knight named Manfredi Chiaramonte. When the Moncada family heard about what had happened, they went straight to the Chiaramonte estate to complain to Manfred. But he refused to help them seek justice for the slain merchants. Instead, he told them to leave him alone and let him eat. This led to a fight that resulted in Manfred's death. The Moncada family's actions immediately caused outrage among the Chiaramonte family and the rest of Sicily. While it was generally accepted that the Moncadas were right to want justice for the murdered traders, they were not right to kill Manfred without any proof that he was involved. Since Manfred was innocent, the public supported his family, so the Moncada family fled to their stronghold to protect themselves. A siege soon followed, but the Moncada defenders held out until a group of German traders came to rescue them. After this incident, the Chiaramontes became known as traitors to the Germans and were shunned throughout all of southern Europe. For nearly 30 years, the Moncada family ruled Sicily, while the Chiaramontes hid away in northern Italy. But everything changed when King Frederick III of Sicily needed help fighting a war. He called upon the Chiaramontes to raise an army for him, which they did. After they helped win the war, the king rewarded them by granting them amnesty and allowing them to return to power in Sicily. This brought the two families into conflict once again. For the next 2 centuries, these two families fought each other at every chance they got. There were assassinations, raids, and massacres. If that wasn't bad enough, outside forces got involved. The Spanish and the French wanted control of Sicily and used the feud to their advantage by siding with one family or the other. It seemed like the hatred between these two families would never end. That is, until 1490, when Frederick de Moncada and Antonio Chiaramonte met secretly to finally call a truce. This feud would end with these two men's deaths, which would bring an end to one of history's longest-running feuds. Sometimes during the Middle Ages, feuds weren't just between families or even friends. Sometimes rulers would hate each other. And when they hated each other, they would use every opportunity to attack one another. This was definitely the case with the conflict between the Dukes of Burgundy and the Kings of France. This conflict was so violent that it would define medieval warfare. One duke in particular, Charles the Bold, would come to define the Duchy of Burgundy. His military campaigns would cause destruction all across Europe. At the height of his power, he controlled parts of modern-day Belgium, Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland, France, and Italy. But as much as Charles the Bold expanded his territory, he was always hungry for more. He wanted to expand his influence into France. When the French king died in 1483, Charles took this as his sign to invade. He claimed that the dead king's daughter was illegitimate and that she couldn't inherit the throne. He installed his own candidate on the throne instead and started to march toward Paris. Charles would go undefeated in war, which made him cocky and confident that he could conquer France. But his hubris would lead to his demise. He would clash with the Swiss Confederacy at the Battle of Nancy in 1477. This battle would result in his death. Charles would die from wounds sustained in battle, making his invasion into France a complete failure. Even though he was dead, the conflict between the House of Burgundy and the French monarchy would continue for another 30 years. Charles's successor would continue to wage war on France, but he would also be defeated. The Duchy of Burgundy would become a part of France in 1506 when the last Burgundian ruler died without an heir. While these feuds were extremely bloody, they weren't quite as violent as the 30 Years' War. To learn about this crazy conflict, watch our video about the bloodiest battles of the 30 Years' War.